"Hand over the land sale money, Mom. We have a right to it." My son's voice rang out in the house where I've lived more than half my life, cold and flat like a hammer hitting a coffin. Before I could answer, his shove sent me face first onto the porch floor. A dry crack came from my chest. I knew instantly something inside me had broken. My daughter, standing behind her brother with arms crossed and eyes like ice, said, "You're over 70. What do you even need money for?" I trembled, but I didn't cry. I just looked straight at them, the two children who once held my hands to walk to school, now gripping greed instead. They didn't know a tiny camera under the orchid by the window was recording every second. And under my bed, a metal box hid the land sale papers for $200,000 and a plan no one knew about. They thought they'd just won, but in 20 minutes, the one forced out of this house won't be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Gladys Whitaker, 71, living alone in a small home on the outskirts of Lexington, Kentucky. I've been a widow for nearly 9 years. Every morning I wake at 5:30 a.m., brew a cup of black coffee with no sugar, toast a slice of bread with butter, then head to the yard to feed my hens. The clucking and the smell of wet grass at dawn are the steady rhythm of my life, repeating, quiet and faithful. This house isn't big, but it's warm. It sits off a dirt road that leads to my family's old field, more than 20 acres, that once made my husband's people proud. When Harold, my husband, was alive, he used to say, "One day we'll see golden wheat across all this, Gladys." But he left too soon, taken by a sudden heart attack. He left me with an old house and a giant piece of land rotting with the years. One corner of the stable roof caved in, the fence sagged and broke, and the grass grew up to my knees. I didn't have money to fix it and didn't want to trouble anyone. After Harold died, Derek and Lila moved to the city. They had jobs and their own families and rarely came back. I don't blame them, but I don't forget either. For 8 years, I earned my own way, cleaning houses, selling turkey with mashed potatoes at the church on weekends, and babysitting the neighbors' kids for a little extra. I never asked my children for money, partly out of pride, partly because I knew that the moment I opened my mouth, the ones listening might not be my children anymore, but people calculating how much is enough to help. I'd rather struggle than lose what little freedom I had left. Everything changed one April morning. A middle-aged man in a gray suit and red tie pulled up at my gate. He introduced himself as Mark Dillon, representing a construction company building a new upscale neighborhood. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, voice gentle but firm, "we'd like to buy all your land to develop our new housing project. The location is prime. We're ready to pay $200,000 in cash." I froze. $200,000. I'd never heard that number tied to my name. He added the company would handle all paperwork and taxes if I agreed to sign within a month. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring into the dim stretch of the field where Harold's shadow used to fall in the evenings. The wind ran through the willows, and I asked myself, would he blame me if I sold his dream? I wrestled for weeks. Then one night I dreamed of Harold. He smiled, eyes as kind as ever. "You've carried this land and me long enough. Now it's time to live for yourself." I woke up in tears. The next day, I signed. 3 weeks later, $200,000 hit my account. I told no one. Not Lila, not Derek, not even Mabel, my elderly neighbor who'd shared so many years of loneliness with me. I had a feeling that silence was my armor. I took a small portion to fix the house. New metal roofing, fresh paint, updated wiring. All the paperwork, contracts, and the few pieces of jewelry my mother left me went into a silver metal box hidden under my bed. No one knew. No one needed to know. Every afternoon, I still sat on the porch with a warm cup of tea, watching sunlight spill over the lawn. On the outside, I looked like any quiet old woman. Inside, a new fire was catching. I had a plan, something that would make Harold proud and help others find the light my sister Ruth never had. I was going to start the Ruth Hope Fund, a program to help low-income women pay for cancer treatment. Ruth died 10 years ago from that disease, after selling everything to cover hospital bills. I swore I wouldn't let anyone else go through that. For the first 2 weeks after the sale, everything stayed calm. I still woke up early, still drank coffee, still sat on the porch, only now, when I closed my eyes, the future looked brighter. But my peace was thin, like a still pond that a single stone could shatter. One afternoon, Lila drove up. Her shiny white SUV stopped at the gate. She stepped out with the smile I'd known since she was little, the kind that shows up when she wants something. "Hi, Mom," she said, sweet as brown sugar. "How are you? I was talking to Mrs. Mitchell. Sounds like you sold the land?" My hand shook around my glass. So Mrs. Mitchell's chatty mouth had blown down the wall of silence I'd built all month. I nodded. "Yes, I sold it." Lila tilted her head, smile widening. "That's wonderful. You must have gotten a pretty good amount, right? How much, Mom?" So blunt it was rude. I didn't answer. "Enough to fix the house," I deflected. But her eyes probed like she could see through me. "I'm just asking to look out for you," she went on. "At your age, holding a lot of cash is risky. You should let me manage it. Conrad and I have a business. If you could loan us 20 or 30,000, we'd pay you right back once things settle." I looked straight at my daughter. Perfect curls, designer dress, a gleaming watch. "No, Lila, I have plans for that money. I'm not lending it." Her smile died. "What plans at 71, Mom? Buying a mansion? Touring the world?" The contempt in her tone tightened my chest. I set my glass down and said slowly, "I have the right to do whatever I want with money I earned. I don't need you telling me how to spend it." The air froze. Lila shot up, face flushed. "You're selfish. That money came from Dad's land. It's our inheritance, too." I just looked at her, a sad smile tugging my mouth. "Inheritance? Where were you when I swept leaves alone, fixed the roof, paid the taxes? When I cooked for hire to survive, did either of you ask if I was okay?" Lila fell silent, turned away, lips pressed tight. I knew this wasn't over. That night I still sat on the porch, but the sunset didn't feel peaceful. A bird perched on the rail and chirped, softly. From far off, I heard the engine I knew too well, Derek's old pickup. The door flew open. Beer breath hit me. "So, you sold the land without telling anyone," he slurred. "Lila says you're hiding money. You going to hide it from us too?" I kept my voice even. "I'm not hiding anything. I just don't feel like explaining my life to anyone." He snorted, eyes red. "That land was Dad's. He died, so we get a share. Don't make us do this another way, Mom." Lila stood in the doorway, arms crossed, neither stopping him nor helping me. I knew this wasn't just talk. I stood, slow. "What do you want?" "Money," Derek snapped. "At least 100,000. Why are you keeping so much? You won't live that long." That line cut straight through me. I didn't recognize my son, the boy who once held my hand on the way to school, who sat in my lap on Christmas Eve for stories, now stood there demanding money like a stranger. I stepped back until my spine hit the porch rail. "Get out of my house," I said quietly, "before I call the police." "Try it," he yelled and shoved. The shove sent me sprawling. My knee scraped the floor. My breath snagged as a sharp crack came from my chest. The world spun. Lila cried out but didn't help me. She just backed away, panicked. Derek went quiet, shocked. I forced myself up, one hand to my chest, lips tight. I didn't say another word. I just glanced at the orchid pot on the sill, the tiny camera recording every second. And under the bed, the metal box was still safe, waiting for the moment it would matter. They thought I was a weak, scared old woman, but they would soon learn I'd been preparing for this day a long time. The next morning, with my chest still throbbing, Lila called. Her voice poured through the phone like honey melting in hot tea. "Mom, I said some things I didn't mean last night. Don't be mad, okay? I just worry about you. How about lunch? Today to make peace?" My treat. I was quiet for a few seconds. The way she said make peace sounded like people say renew a contract. I agreed anyway, partly to see what she was up to, partly because a public place would be safer. I picked Golden Diner, the old family spot on the avenue. Always busy apple pie smells, coffee, and the clink of silverware blending into a comforting soundtrack. I chose a table by the window, where the light made everything visible. At 12 p.m. sharp, Lila walked in. Perfect blonde curls, a fitted dress, expensive perfume filling the corner of the room. What stopped me was who came with her. Conrad, her husband. "Mom, I hope you don't mind Conrad joining. He just wants to help me talk things through." I lifted a corner of my mouth. "For a family matter, it's getting a little crowded." Conrad pulled out a chair, wearing the friendly smile of a salesman who knows his customer is about to take the bait. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice slick and assuring. "I heard from Lila that you received a sizable amount from selling the farm. First off, congratulations, but we think it's best to discuss allocating family assets so everyone can be at ease. I took a sip of water and looked him in the eye. My assets are mine to allocate. That has nothing to do with a son-in-law. Conrad kept the light tone. I'm only speaking from a caregiving perspective. There are a lot of bad actors out there, and you live alone. Holding a lot of cash is honestly dangerous. He made it sound caring, but every word slid across the tabletop like a well-honed blade. Dangerous for who? I asked. For you, of course. He placed a hand on the table, voice dropping as if confiding. If you slip or something unexpected happens, that money won't stay whole. If you let us manage it, we'll invest, make it grow for the whole family, and you'll always have someone watching over you. I knew his type. He'd sold insurance before saying love while steering you to sign on the last line. I leaned back, steady. I don't need anyone watching over me. I'm healthy and clear-minded enough to decide for myself. If you truly care, then leave money out of it. Lila jumped in, a little frantic. I'm only trying to help, Mom. At your age, safety matters more than hoarding cash like a secret. The whole family can benefit. What's wrong with that? I looked at my daughter, feeling like I was talking to a stranger. Lila, I didn't sell that land for someone to benefit. I sold it because it already took my youth. Now it should help someone else live better. Conrad smiled lightly, but a cold spark flickered in his eyes. How noble, Mom, but you should know. Older folks who keep lots of money while living alone tend to have problems, like getting targeted or misunderstood by people they know. Chills ran over me. Are you threatening me, Conrad? He shook his head, still smiling. No, Mom, just stating facts. For a long moment, we only heard a spoon tap a coffee cup. I could hear my own heartbeat in my chest, where yesterday's shove still hurt. I set my napkin down, crisp and clear. If this is a peace lunch, it's over. I have nothing else to discuss. Lila called after me, voice cracking. Mom, don't go. We're just talking. I stood, swung my bag onto my shoulder. Conrad stayed seated, fingering his cup. As I passed him, I heard him murmur, not needing to look to know he was smiling. We'll find another way. I paused half a second, then walked out. The noon sun glared off the pavement, but inside I felt ice cold. That night, I didn't go home. I drove straight to Mabel's place a few blocks away. She opened the door, and before she could ask anything, I burst into tears. She pulled me in, sat me on the sofa, and made me a mug of hot peppermint tea. I told her everything. The shove the night before, the peace lunch today, and Conrad's last line. When I finished, Mabel held my gaze for a moment, then said softly, Gladys, those kids don't know boundaries anymore. You need to keep evidence, every word, every text, anything. And if anything like this happens again, call the police. I nodded. For the first time, I knew I needed an ally. Mabel was quiet a moment, then set a hand on my shoulder. But let me ask you something, Gladys. What are you going to do with that money? I know you're not the kind to just stash it in a bank. I went silent for a few seconds. I'd told no one, but maybe it was time. I spoke low, voice shaky but firm. I'm starting a fund, the Ruth Hope Fund. Mabel looked up. Ruth, your sister? I nodded, tears spilling before I could stop them. She's been gone 10 years, remember? Breast cancer. She sold her house, her car, everything, and it still wasn't enough. I promised her if I ever had the means, I'd help. Other women not die because they're poor. Mabel squeezed my hand, eyes red. Oh, Gladys, that's extraordinary. And those kids, they don't know any of this? I didn't dare tell them, I said. If they knew, they'd laugh. To them, everything is just a dollar amount. I looked down at my hands, veins raised, rough from years of sweeping, scrubbing, counting coins. They don't know each dollar is hours of labor, sleepless nights, and all the times I told myself, this will pass. To them, I'm just a piggy bank in a quilted coat. Mabel pulled me into her arms like a big sister. You did right. You don't owe an apology for keeping what you earned. I leaned on her shoulder and exhaled. I think it's time to move forward. No more dodging. I'll keep quiet, but I'll be ready to push back if they take one more step. I have the camera, a lawyer, and a friend. Mabel smiled. And courage. I smiled weakly. Outside, a light rain began. Drops slid down the window, catching the warm glow of her lamp. For the first time in days, I felt safe. That night, after Mabel slept, I stayed up. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote everything: dates, words, even their expressions. My handwriting shook as I wrote. If the day comes when I can't speak, these pages will speak for me. I tucked the notebook into my bag and checked the clock. 2:14 a.m. The ache along my ribs hadn't faded, but my heart was steady. From this moment on, the game had changed. No more being the mother who endures for peace and quiet. I am the guardian of my own life and of a promise I still owe my sister Ruth. I smiled into the dark and told myself, if they want a war, I'll show them how an old woman fights. I went home early the next morning. Cool air followed the night's rain, and the dirt road still shone with puddles. I stopped at the gate, turned off the engine, and felt my pulse quicken. Maybe it was a hunch. Maybe it was the pain in my chest, but something felt off. The wooden gate was ajar, though I knew I'd locked it last night. I stepped into the mud and saw them footprints pressed deep into the path, larger, heavier, and newer than mine. I paused, drew a deep breath, and tried to steady myself. Maybe it's just the paper boy, I told myself, even as cold crept down my spine. When I opened the door, I froze. The orchid pot by the window was knocked over, soil scattered across the floor. Drawers in the living room hung open, things tossed around like someone had been searching. The knit scarf my mother made me was thrown on a chair, and Harold's picture on the wall hung crooked. I went to the bedroom. The metal box under the bed holding the sale papers and the Ruth Hope plan was still there, but it had been moved. Someone had touched it. I sank onto the mattress, hands shaking. They had the old spare key. Years ago, when Derek lived nearby, I'd given him an extra set for emergencies. I never imagined the emergency would be the day he came to steal from his own mother. I grabbed my phone and called the locksmith. Mrs. Whitaker, I can come tomorrow morning around 10 a.m. I'm working up north today. I nodded, voice unsteady. Yes, tomorrow morning. Replace every lock inside and out. Don't miss a single one. I hung up, locked the front door tight, pulled the curtains, and wedged a chair under the bedroom knob. Then I went to the kitchen, opened a drawer, took out a small paring knife, and slid it under my pillow. For the first time in my life, at 71, I had to sleep in my own house, afraid of the children I brought into this world. I barely slept. The wind hissed through the doorframe, and the floorboards creaked every time I turned. Every sound felt like footsteps. I lay there staring at the ceiling, haunted. Around 3 a.m., I heard a faint noise on the porch. Maybe a cat, maybe not. My heart pounded. So hard I pressed a hand to my chest to steady it. I told myself, tomorrow, make it official. Get proof. Protect yourself. The next morning, as sunlight slipped through the window, I was righting the fallen plants when a motorcycle stopped out front. It was Howard, my late husband's cousin. He's a mechanic in town, quiet and steady, and I know he cares. He took off his helmet and lowered his voice. Gladys, I heard. Derek's going too far. I stilled. What do you mean? Howard glanced around, then spoke even softer. Last night at Mason's bar, I saw him with two tattooed guys I didn't recognize. I only caught a little, but I heard your name. One of them said, if she won't sign, threaten to put her in a nursing home, say she's not right in the head. Derek said, do it. My mom's weak now. Ice spread through me. You're sure? He nodded. They also mentioned a financial power of attorney. If they got your signature, they could. Transfer everything easy. They talked about finding a flexible doctor to sign off on cognitive decline. I had to grab the table to stay upright. Stealing the money wasn't enough. Now they wanted to steal my right to live, to make me legally incapacitated so their crimes would look clean. Howard gripped my shoulder. You need to act, Gladys. Don't let them move first. I nodded, hands still shaking. Thank you, Howard. I know what to do. That afternoon, I drove straight to Attorney Kaplan, the one who handled the land sale. Mr. Kaplan is in his 60s, tall and lean with thin glasses, and speaks in a calm way that makes you feel safe. As I told him everything, he quietly took notes. I have the land sale papers and the contracts, I said, laying the folder on his desk. He looked them over and nodded. Your paperwork is ironclad, Gladys. There's no legal crack for them to contest ownership. But he looked up, eyes firm. I believe you, and I know these tactics. If they try to declare you incapacitated, they can manufacture records, even bribe a doctor to sign. Then a guardian would control your assets. In other words, you lose your say. My throat went dry. What do I do to stop that? We get ahead of them, Kaplan said, voice like a nail set true. You'll undergo an independent capacity evaluation with notarization. Then I'll help you execute a new will, plus medical and financial powers of attorney money all by your instruction. Once that's done, anyone trying to override you will hit the law head on. I sat still, absorbing it like a shield being placed in my hands. How fast can we do this, Mr. Kaplan? Within 3 days, if you cooperate fully. Then we start today, he smiled. I figured you weren't the quitting type. In the afternoon, I went to the independent psychology clinic Kaplan recommended. The doctor was a middle-aged woman who spoke gently and asked me everything. My name, dates, recent events, and a few simple calculations. I answered clearly, even shared a few funny memories that made her laugh. When we finished, she signed the evaluation and wrote, "Patient is lucid, fully oriented, with complete legal and functional capacity." Holding that paper, I felt a weight lift. That evening, Kaplan called. "You should also prepare a financial power of attorney that states only someone you choose may sign on your behalf, and only if you are unconscious, not mentally impaired. We'll notarize it tomorrow morning." I agreed immediately. That whole night, I sat at the table and wrote a list of the people I trust. Mabel first, then Kaplan. I also drafted a new will, leaving the bulk to the charity fund and a small portion to my grandchildren, the ones still innocent, not yet blinded by money. The next morning, I went back to Kaplan's office. We signed and notarized everything: the capacity evaluation, the medical power of attorney, the financial power of attorney, and the will. As I signed the last line, I suddenly felt as if I'd built a fortress around myself, not from bricks, but from the law. Kaplan stacked the papers neatly and looked at me. "You did exactly the right thing. But remember, if they keep harassing you, call 911 immediately. Don't endure it alone. I'll file for a restraining order if needed." I nodded and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Kaplan. I'm not afraid anymore. At least now I know I'm not alone." When I stepped out of the office, the spring sunlight fell straight on my face. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Behind me, in my brown leather bag, were small sheets of paper stronger than any threat. If Derek and Lila wanted a war, I was ready not with tears, but with reason and the law. I knew the storm wasn't over, but this time I had a light in my hand. That afternoon, the sky turned a heavy gray. The wind carried moisture from last night's rain, making the grapefruit tree in the front yard sway, its leaves scraping each other with a cold sound. I had just made tea and was about to read the paper when a familiar engine made me freeze. Derek's black pickup. It stopped at the gate, tires crunching on gravel. My heart pounded. Instinct told me to stay away from the window. I lifted the curtain beside Derek. A gray sedan was parked across the street, and inside were two strange men in dark jackets and sunglasses, faces expressionless. I held my breath. Something was wrong. Derek got out, looked around, then tapped on the sedan's window. One of the men stepped out and said something I couldn't hear. Seconds later, I saw him pull a metal tool from his pocket that looked like lockpicks. My whole body went numb. I crouched and moved behind the grapefruit tree near the porch, took out my phone, and called Mabel. "Mabel, it's me." I spoke fast, my voice shaking. "Derek, he's here. Two strange men with him. They're casing my house." Silence for a moment. Then Mabel spoke firmly. "Gladys, dial 911 right now. Don't talk to them. Don't go outside. Stay in the house, lock the doors, and tell them it's an attempted break-in." My hands shook so badly I hit the wrong number a few times before I got through. While I waited for the dispatcher, I heard Derek shout from the yard, "Mom, come out, let's talk." His voice sounded dry, like a man running out of patience. I stood behind the curtain and tried to stay calm. The hair on my neck stood up. The dispatcher asked for my address and the situation. I answered quickly and clearly, "This is Gladys Whitaker, 71. My son and two strangers are trying to get into my house without my permission." The dispatcher reassured me, "Officers are on their way. Stay inside with the doors locked. Do not confront them." Outside, I heard Derek say something to the two men. One of them chuckled, his raspy voice carrying on the wind. "Old locks like this, 5 minutes and it's open." I held my breath, gripping the phone. I turned on the voice recorder and set it near the window. Every sound, their voices, their laughter, their footsteps grinding the gravel was captured clearly. A few minutes later, Lila's white SUV appeared at the end of the street. She got out in high heels that sank into the mud with each step. perfect waves of blonde hair, full makeup, but her voice was all urgency. "Hurry up! Mom won't listen, just go in!" I saw Derek glance at her, then signal the two men forward. All three headed for the front door. I backed behind the wall, my heart about to burst. Sweat ran down my temples. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I never thought I'd be hiding behind a wall in my own home, avoiding the son I carried and raised with everything I had. One of the men tried the doorknob. I heard metal scraping inside the lock, then a low curse. "Tight. She must have changed it." "Then break it," Derek said softly, voice cold. I turned and ran toward the kitchen. Only one thought in my head: if they get in, I'll bolt out the back door. I grabbed the paring knife, my palms slick with sweat, and then the siren wailed in the distance. The sound cut through the air like light in the dark. I lunged to the window and peeked out. The gray sedan roared to life and shot off, gravel spraying. The two strangers vanished in seconds. Derek swore and kicked the gate. Lila backed away, looking frantic. Less than half a minute later, two patrol cars pulled up, red and blue lights washing over the yard. A young officer stepped out and spoke sharply. "What's going on here?" Derek threw up his hands, pretending to be calm. "Nothing, officer. I'm just here to see my mother." "She misunderstood," Lila chimed in, voice trembling but clearly rehearsed. "That's right, my mom's just a little stressed. We didn't mean any harm." I opened the door and stepped out. The sun was lowering, orange light filtering through the grapefruit leaves and catching the mud on their shoes. I held the doorknob tight and said, hoarse but firm, "That's not true. They didn't come to visit. They came to force me to sign financial papers. I have a recording, a camera, and a witness." Another officer took notes and asked, "Can you give us the details, Mrs. Whitaker?" I drew a deep breath and told them everything from hiring men to break in to planning to declare me incompetent. I named Howard, who overheard them scheming at the bar, and Attorney Kaplan, who holds my capacity evaluation. Derek squinted, his face shifting from fake casual to rigid. "What are you even talking about, Mom?" "I'm trying to help you." "Help me by hiring people to break my lock?" I answered, voice calm but trembling. The officer looked at Derek, then back at me. "Do you have evidence?" I opened my phone and played the recording I just made. Derek's voice came through crystal clear. "Old locks like this, 5 minutes, and it's open." No one said a word. Only the wind moved, carrying the damp smell of soil. The young officer nodded. "That's enough for us to make a report and open an investigation. Please stay inside." "We'll handle it," I nodded. But just as I turned, Derek shouted, "You're tearing this family apart over a pile of damned money." Rage spilled from his eyes. Before I could react, he lunged. The nearest officer threw out an arm, but Derek shoved him aside. It happened in a blink. I only saw my son's face twisted with anger before a hard shove hit my shoulder. I fell backward onto the gravel. Something in my chest snapped, pain shot from my ribs up my throat. I couldn't breathe. Lila screamed, and the officer immediately restrained Derek. The sky spun above me. The siren wailed again, this time for an ambulance. I lay there clutching my chest, mouth open, with no air coming. The smells of dirt, sweat, and rust bled into the air. Through the haze, I saw a police officer lean over me, his voice fading. "She's conscious, move fast. Rib fracture could hit the lung." Red and blue lights flickered in my vision, mixing with Lila's sobs. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. White light, the steady beep of the heart monitor. A young nurse smiled kindly. "Mrs. Whitaker, you're safe now. You've got 2 fractures on your left ribs, but it's not life-threatening. The police arrested the man who attacked you. Sounds like he's your son." I shut my eyes and tears spilled, whether from pain or a nameless loss I couldn't tell. There's a kind of wound that isn't in the bone but in the heart, where the image of your little boy once lived, running through a golden field and calling you Mom, in a clear, bright voice. All that remained now was the cold wail of sirens and a shove that shattered what was most sacred between mother and child. I turned toward the window, where the day's last light slid across the glass and fell on my trembling hands. I whispered to myself, "They think they can push me to the wall, but they forget once I'm there, I'm not afraid anymore." I lay still on the hospital bed, the heart monitor ticking steadily, punctuated by nurses' footsteps in the hallway. The pale fluorescent light made everything in the room feel frozen. Every breath felt like a tiny knife in my chest, sharp, but enough to remind me I was still alive. Dr. Lewis, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, walked in holding my X-ray. He sniffed, set it on the table and pointed to a faint shadow. Mrs. Whitaker, you've got 2 fractures on the left ribs. No surgery needed, but you must rest for 6 to 8 weeks. Avoid exertion and big laughs, and take the pain medication as prescribed. I'll add an anti-inflammatory. If you feel short of breath or develop a fever, call us immediately. I nodded and tried to smile in thanks. The smile pulled a burning ache. He gave a few more reminders and left me with the sting of disinfectant and an emptiness spreading in my chest. Not long after, 2 police officers came in. One was the older officer from the day before the one who handcuffed Derek. He took off his hat and spoke evenly. Mrs. Whitaker, we need to confirm a few things to complete the file. Do you want to press charges against your son? The question made the room feel solid as stone. I looked down at my thin hands, the same hands that once wiped his face, mended his shirts, held his when we crossed the street. Press charges against your child. No one is born ready for that. I was silent for a long time. The monitor beeped as if urging me on. I saw Derek's face again, beer on his breath, eyes red, shouting, "Give me the money or else!" Then the shove, then the crack. I lifted my head, my voice rough. Yes, I will press charges. If it were you, standing between motherhood and justice, what would you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know where your heart leans. The 2 officers nodded, no pity, no judgment. They just wrote, then had me sign. When they left and the door clicked softly shut, it felt like I'd closed the book on a lifetime of being a compliant mother. That afternoon, Lila came. No flowers, just a small purse and swollen eyes. The minute she saw me, she cried, voice catching, "Mom, Derek didn't mean it. He was drunk. He just lost control for a moment." I turned toward the window, toward the bleak sky. A single leaf drifted onto the sill, and I heard myself answer softly but clearly, "Ribs don't break on their own, Lila." She froze. The sobbing shifted to broken hiccups. "Mom, I know he was wrong, but please, don't let him go to jail. He has a wife and kids. He lost his job if this happens." I looked at her, the daughter I once believed would bring gentleness to my old age. "You talk like I'm the cruel one. Tell me who hired 2 men to scare me. Who stood in my yard shouting and pounding the door until I was afraid in my own home?" Lila lowered her head. No answer. Tears hit the cold white tile and vanished. "He's truly sorry, Mom. He said he only wanted to scare you into sharing the money." I closed my eyes. Along with the dull ache in my left ribs, something cracked inside me, the part of a mother's love that broke with the bone. Night fell, and Mabel dropped by. She brought chicken soup and a small sachet of lavender to help me sleep. The moment she saw me, she set the tray down and wiped her eyes. "Oh, Gladys, why must your life be this hard?" I gave a weak smile. "Bodily pain is tolerable, Mabel. It's the pain in the heart that's hard to heal." She sat by me, helped me take my medicine, then stroked my hair like a real sister. "You did the right thing. Sometimes forgiveness is a double-edged knife. If you keep covering for them, they'll come back and kill you by other means. Slower but certain." I nodded, tears welling not from regret, but because I knew she was right. I'd forgiven so many times they mistook kindness for a doormat. The next morning, the police returned with an update. "Mrs. Whitaker, we arrested the 2 tattooed men from that day. Both have records for fraud and assault. During questioning, one said Derek hired them to intimidate you for cash." I felt nothing but numbness. No anger, no tears, just a hollow place in me when the one who betrays you shares your blood. "We'll need your signature to proceed with charges," the officer said. I signed. My hand trembled, but the letters were clear. I also turned over the mini-camera video and the audio recording from the break-in. When I finished, I felt lighter, though the ache in my chest still throbbed. That night, close to midnight, the phone rang. I knew who it was the moment I saw the number. "Mom, please don't let them send him to prison." Lila's voice cracked with panic. "He's in custody. They said it could be years. Please, he isn't a bad person, just hot-headed. If you forgive him, they'll reduce the sentence." I was silent. After a while, I asked softly, "What about my rights, Lila? What about my life? Does it mean anything to you?" Only a long sigh came from the other end, then a line that dropped me into a pit. "We just need the money so badly, Mom." I closed my eyes. No reply. Then I hung up. the room sank into silence. Outside, a thin crescent moon hung pale like a scar in the sky. I lay there and listened to my slow heartbeat, every thump an unspoken question. How can a mother forgive when her child breaks her bone and faith alike? 2 days later, Attorney Kaplan visited. He brought a file and spoke short and clear. As always, we filed for a restraining order. The police agreed to keep an eye on your street. None of them may come within 200 feet of you. The case has been submitted to the court. Derek will have to appear in 10 days. I nodded, my voice weak but steady. Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. I just want peace. I don't hate him. I just want to be safe. He gave a sad smile. You're stronger than most people I meet. Sometimes that's the only thing that gets justice where it belongs. Before he left, he handed me a small note. If they contact you again, don't respond. Record it, save it, and send it to me. I was discharged 2 days later. Mabel picked me up in her old car, the air filled with peppermint and lavender. Through the window, I watched my house grow small behind us, once a nest, now only wrecked memories. When we turned onto her street, she glanced over and said softly, "Stay with me until you're fully healed. Here, you have tea, candles, and a friend." I smiled. "And peace." She squeezed my hand. "Yes, peace, the one thing money or children can't buy." That evening, I sat in Mabel's garden watching the sunset turn the trees pink. Crickets and wind made a light, easy chorus, no shouting, no slamming doors, no fear. I laid a hand over my ribs, still knitting back together. Inside, I told myself, the pain will pass, but the lesson will stay. And deep in my heart, I knew forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to let a wound become shackles. But before I forgive, I must protect myself, because if I don't, no one else will. Late spring air in Mabel's garden began to smell of lavender and rain-damp soil. I sat on the wicker chair by the porch, a thin blanket over my shoulders, steam curling from a mug of peppermint tea. 6 weeks had passed since the day my life shattered, and only now were the ribs beginning to stop throbbing. The wound in my heart, I wasn't sure it would ever heal. That morning, I thought I'd finally have a quiet day. Mabel was hanging towels in the yard when a strange car stopped at the gate. A silver sedan with peeling paint idled in the sun. A man climbed out, shoulders hunched, hands shaking as he shut the door. Conrad. I knew him instantly, the old gray coat, the washed-out face, the sunken, sleepless eyes. Mabel looked at me, questioning. I nodded slightly. "I'll talk to him." He walked over, each step heavy. Standing in front of me, his voice went hoarse as he tried to keep it steady. "Mrs. Gladys, I came to apologize." I said nothing and held his gaze. Sunlight hit his hair, revealing a few silver threads. For a moment, he had none of the swagger he'd worn at the diner when he talked about allocating family assets. "You have every right to hate me," he said, eyes on the floor. "Everything that happened was my fault, not just Derek's or Lila's. I was the one who pushed them. I pulled the strings. I thought if we scared you, you'd give in, but things got out of hand." My heartbeat slowed. Conrad swallowed and went on, voice almost shaking. "I owe $120,000. Gambling, bad deals, you name it. Months ago, they started coming for it, threatened to show up at the house. I panicked. I told Lila, then Derek found out. They thought if they pushed you to share, it would all be fine. I know I was wrong, and when I wanted to stop, it was too late." The breeze lifted the thin curtain. I looked at the man who'd called himself the family's provider, now bowing his head like a scolded child. "I've told the police," he continued, "and I'll testify in court. I don't want you to worry anymore. You can rest. I'll say I was behind it, that I hired those 2 guys. I just want to make amends, the only way left." I gripped the arm of the chair. A small stab of pain shot through my side. I wasn't exactly surprised. Deep down, I'd sensed someone stood behind Derek, and now he'd said it himself. I drew a long breath and spoke slowly. "You're apologizing, but apologies don't set bones. They don't erase the night I slept with a knife under my pillow. I heard strangers' footsteps around my house. That wasn't just fear, that was humiliation." He lowered his head, shoulders trembling. "I understand. You don't have to forgive me. I only ask, Please let the kids visit you. The grandkids, they're innocent. They miss you. I was quiet. Two little faces rose in my mind, Lucy, 8, who sends me drawings, and Caleb, 5, who once ran circles in the yard and called me Grandma Glad in a peal of laughter. They had nothing to do with their parents' sins. After a long moment, I said, "You're right. Children are innocent. If you want to bring them, I agree. But hear me clearly. This door is always open to the grandchildren and closed to the adults who caused this. Whoever did wrong bears the consequences." Conrad looked up, eyes wet. "Thank you. Truly." I didn't answer. I turned toward the lavender swaying in the yard. The afternoon sun fell on the soft purple, gentle and sad, like my sister Ruth's gaze. After Conrad left, I sat a long time. Mabel came from the kitchen and set a cup of tea in front of me. "He told you everything?" she asked. I nodded. "He's right." I heard the fear in his voice. "But that doesn't change anything." Mabel sat beside me. "No, it doesn't change the past, but it might change how you close this chapter." I gave a tired smile. "You mean forgiveness?" "Yes," Mabel nodded. "But it's forgiveness with boundaries. Forgiving doesn't mean throwing the door wide open so someone can hurt you again. It just means you let them stand outside, see the consequences of what they did, and if they truly repent, they'll find their way to make it right." I looked at my friend, sunlight glinting in her eyes. I knew Mabel was right, but inside me everything was tangled: anger, pity, and longing. I missed Ruth, my sister, who died of cancer. Because of Ruth, I made the plan for the Ruth Hope Fund, so poor women wouldn't have to die because they couldn't afford treatment. Ruth always believed people could change if given a chance. I said softly, "Mabel, sometimes I think, if Ruth were still here, she'd tell me to give Conrad a chance to make amends." Mabel held my hand, her voice gentler. "You know she'd be right, but a chance doesn't mean forgetting everything. Keep your boundaries for yourself. And remember, Gladys' forgiveness isn't because they deserve it. It's because you deserve peace." I nodded faintly, tears falling onto the back of my hand. "Conditional forgiveness," I whispered. "That's the only thing I can offer." Late afternoon, the phone rang. Attorney Kaplan called, his voice steady and warm as always. "Mrs. Whitaker, a quick update. Your case looks very strong. All the evidence is clear. The police completed statements from the two men. Both confirmed Conrad was the one who hired them, and I'm told he voluntarily confessed, which will count in his favor, while Derek will still be prosecuted for assault and threatening an elderly person." I sighed lightly. What a twist. The puppet master is the first to bow his head. Kaplan was quiet for a few seconds, then said, "Maybe that's the start of real accountability. Don't worry, the preliminary hearing is next week. I'll be there with you." I thanked him and hung up. Outside the window, sunset spread like a thin copper cloth over Mabel's garden. I heard neighborhood kids laughing, the wind moving across the old roof. Another day was ending. I set a hand over my chest and felt my breathing slow into a rhythm. I knew there was more coming. Court, testimony, facing Derek, Lila's eyes. But I wasn't trembling anymore. Conrad could bow. I would not. Only by standing upright could I keep the rest of my life from being snapped again. And if anyone asked whether I had forgiven, I would say, I don't carry hatred anymore, but I haven't forgotten. I'm just letting them live with their own guilt. On the porch steps, I closed my eyes and heard Mabel call from inside, "Gladys, your tea's getting cold." I let out a small laugh, weak but lighter. "Coming, Mabel. Today is beautiful and so is my heart." The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtain, laying a soft gold over the little room where I was staying at Mabel's. The smell of toast and coffee drifted from the kitchen, blending with the radio's report about a charity program in the next town. I sat there feeling lighter than I had in weeks, but I also knew there was one thing I hadn't told anyone but Attorney Kaplan, the truth about the $200,000. Mabel brought a tray of tea to the porch, set it in front of me, and sat down beside me. She looked at me with that kind gaze that said she understood I was about to say something big. I took a deep breath. "Mabel," I said, "remember I told you I'd set up a charity fund?" She nodded. "Yes, the Ruth Hope Fund." I smiled gently. "Now I'll tell you everything, not just the idea, but the whole plan." I explained that after selling the farm for $200,000, I split the money into 3 clear parts, a small portion so I could live simply for the rest of my life without depending on anyone, a portion for an emergency medical fund in case the worst happened, and the largest part, over $150,000, to establish the Ruth Hope Fund to help low-income women fighting cancer. Mabel fell silent, her eyes filling. "Gladys, you're really putting almost all of it in?" I nodded, my voice soft but firm. That money isn't just mine, Mabel. It's a debt of love I owe Ruth. I still remember every detail from Ruth's last months. Ruth, with a smile, warm as sunlight and hands calloused from endless hours at the sewing shop. When the doctor said it was late-stage cancer, she told me, "Don't worry, I'm still strong." But I knew she was lying. I watched her sell the old car, then the little house, and finally our mother's wedding ring, the last thing we had after our father passed. She cried taking it off, saying, "If it buys me a few more weeks, it's worth it." And then, those few weeks didn't save anything. The day she died, there was still a hospital bill on the table, just a few $1,000s, but a weight on the honor of a woman who had worked all her life. I promised her at Ruth's graveside in the cold autumn rain that if I ever could, I would help women like her not have to sell everything just to buy a little more time. And now, I finally could. I opened the notebook on the table to the first page, where my slanted handwriting read, Ruth Hope Fund Bylaws. Goal: provide direct payment of hospital bills and medication for low-income women with cancer. No middlemen, no complicated paperwork, just proof of treatment. Every disbursement must go straight to the hospital, not into a personal account. No one draws a salary from the fund. What we keep is trust and gratitude. Mabel held the notebook and turned each page. I had written out the budget, hospital contacts, and eligible support categories in careful hand. "How long have you been this prepared?" she asked quietly. "Since the day I sold the land," I answered. The moment Kaplan finished the transfer, I started drafting the bylaws. That sale, it wasn't a prize for me. It was a lever to fulfill my promise to Ruth. Mabel set the notebook down and took my hand. "You're doing the right thing, Gladys, but I'm afraid your children may never understand." I sighed softly. "They don't need to. They only need to know their mother used the money for something decent." I looked out at the tame yard. Sunlight slipped through the trees, flecks of brightness like memories. When everything happened, when I was shoved, threatened, told, "At your age you should hand it over," none of them asked me, "Are you hurt, Mom?" All they asked was, "How much did you get?" That was enough for me to understand. They wanted a number, not love. Maybe that's why I felt even more certain I had to do the opposite of that greed, use money to make kindness. When Kaplan called with the news, I decided to sign the legal paperwork so the fund could operate as soon as my doctor cleared my health. His office was small but bright, smelling of fresh paper and coffee. He handed me the document and explained each line. "You'll be the founder and nominal overseer," he said. "I'll handle the legal administration. If anything happens, the fund continues independently, and no one in your family has the right to interfere." I signed with a hand that still shook a little, but inside I felt a deep, steady calm. Kaplan looked up and smiled. "Congratulations, Gladys. Not many people turn their pain into light for others," I answered softly. "I'm not looking for light, Mr. Kaplan. I'm keeping a promise at my sister's grave." A week later, Kaplan called again. He said the county office wanted to hold a small press conference about the Preventing Elder Abuse campaign and asked me to speak and share my story. I was quiet for a long time, then agreed. Not for fame or pity, but because I knew if my story gave even one other elder the courage to say no, then my wounds weren't wasted. I spent the evening drafting the speech at Mabel's small wooden desk. The warm lamp lit each line like a gentle reminder. I wrote, edited, and wrote again. Some people think old age means weakness, compliance, and gullibility. But I've learned we have the right to say no even to our own children, not because we don't love them, but because we must. Live true to our values. Money doesn't save anyone who has lost their decency, but a small act, a hand extended, can save someone's faith in humanity. I put the pen down and exhaled. Those words weren't just for a crowd. They were for me. I once thought silence kept the peace at home. Now I know silence isn't peace, it's the shadow of fear. Today, by speaking, I am not afraid. The next morning, Mabel read the draft. She nodded, smiling. "It's good, Gladys. You're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting others. You know, respecting yourself is also a way to protect the community." I squeezed her hand, a complicated tangle of gratitude and calm rising in me. I knew that if Ruth were alive, she'd be proud. And if my children heard that speech, I hoped they'd understand that I still love them only now that love is placed where it can save lives, not feed selfishness. That afternoon, I took the speech into the garden where the sun had softened. I read it one last time, then looked up and whispered, "Ruth, I kept my word." A light breeze stirred the lavender. I smiled. In that moment, I saw clearly that I had found peace not in silence, but in action. On the morning of the hearing, a thin fog hung over Madison, pale sunlight sliding through the courthouse windows in Dane County. I sat in the second row, hands clasped, a light blue scarf around my neck, the last gift Ruth gave me. Whether from cold or nerves, I felt every heartbeat, heavy and steady like a gavel about to strike. Before the bench, Derek stood with his head down. His face was gaunt, stubble rough, shirt wrinkled. I once thought if this day came, I would cry. I didn't, only a cold emptiness in my chest. The judge read the charges. Defendant Derek Whitaker is charged with 3 counts: assault on an elderly person, conspiracy to intimidate, and conspiracy to misappropriate personal property. Each word cut the air like a blade. Across the aisle, the 2 tattooed men, the ones who were in my yard that day, bowed their heads, handcuffs flashing under the lights. The prosecutor presented the evidence, footage from the mini camera, the audio recording, police reports, and witness testimony from Howard. Everything was clear, irrefutable. I listened like I was watching a past version of myself, an elderly woman trembling in her own house, living with fear and betrayal. When it was his turn, Derek pled guilty. His voice was hoarse, almost choking. I plead guilty, Your Honor. I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm sorry. I didn't meet his eyes. Regret? Maybe. But regret doesn't knit bones or erase nights spent afraid of your own son. The 2 accomplices also pled guilty. With prior records for assault and theft, they received heavier sentences, one 4 years, the other 3. As officers led them away, I saw the black dragon tattoos on their wrists, a reminder of a darkness I never wanted to touch again. Then came Derek's sentence. Defendant Derek Whitaker is sentenced to 2 years in prison, eligible for parole after 1 year upon completion of alcohol and gambling rehabilitation. During this time, the defendant is prohibited from contacting or approaching the plaintiff in any form. I closed my eyes. 2 years, not long, but enough time to face himself. I didn't wish him suffering. I wished him clarity. Lila stood in court that day with a drawn face, no makeup, blonde hair tied back. She cooperated, turned over her phone, messages, and confirmed Derek and Conrad's plan. The prosecutor recommended leniency, and the judge agreed. Defendant Lila Whitaker is sentenced to a suspended term and 1 year of community service at Street Formation. Mercy Nursing Center. At the word nursing, something pinched in me, a bitter loop of fate. Maybe heaven meant for her to look straight at the loneliness of the elderly she once dismissed. I said nothing when she looked at me. I offered. Only a small nod, not forgiveness, but closure. Then, Conrad. He looked nothing like before, thin, grayer, eyes lowered. When called, he stepped up. Voice small but clear. I plead guilty to involvement in threats and hiring men to intimidate Mrs. Gladys Whitaker. I voluntarily confessed and fully cooperated. I accept responsibility. The court ruled 2 years of community supervision, 800 hours of community service, and full restitution for material damages to the plaintiff. Leaving the stand, Conrad turned and bowed toward me. For the first time, I saw no scheming, only real shame. I answered with a slight nod, no blessing, no grudge, just acceptance. The hearing ended after nearly 3 hours. I received a long-term restraining order against both Derek and Lila, with no expiration. Kaplan sat beside me, hand on the table, voice low and warm. "How do you feel?" I drew a deep breath and spoke slowly. "I didn't beat anyone, Mr. Kaplan. I just chose the law over fear." He smiled kindly. "That is a win, Gladys." When I stepped outside, melting snow scattered bright patches on the ground. A few local reporters waited quietly. They didn't push, just asked, "Do you have a message for people going through what you did?" I paused, looked into the lens, and spoke clearly. "Don't let anyone, even your own child, make you believe you are weak. Old age doesn't mean helplessness. If you're being hurt, speak up. I don't want anyone else to live through the nights I did. A breeze lifted, cameras clicked. I heard Mabel behind me, her voice warm in the wind. Let's go, Gladys. It's over now. That afternoon, the local paper ran, 71-year-old Madison woman wins elder abuse case against son and son-in-law case sounds an alarm for the community. Below was a photo of me outside the courthouse, a slight but steady smile. Kaplan said the city wanted to use my line, "I chose the law over fear," and its elder abuse awareness campaign. I didn't object. If one sentence could give someone else the courage to step into the light, I would gladly give it. The next day, I went back to my old house. Mabel came with me. It was quiet, but no longer cold. I opened the window and drew in the season's first breeze, listened to birds calling on the roof. Soft, yellow sunlight fell on the kitchen's wooden table, the place where I had cried and feared, now holding only peace. I brewed 2 cups of tea and took them to the porch. Mabel sat across from me, morning light soft on her kind face. She set her hand on mine and squeezed. "You survived, Gladys. Not just survived, you truly won." I smiled. "No, Mabel. I simply stayed true to myself. Maybe that's a win already." We sat and watched the sun climb over the trees. The kettle hummed, blending with the wind under the eaves. I took a sip, closed my eyes, and let the warmth spread. Inside me, there was no anger, no hate, just one clear feeling: freedom. Freedom from fear, from guilt, from nights of hiding tears under the pillow. Far off, church bells drifted through the air, a gentle reminder: life can break us, but we're the ones who stand back up. I looked at the clear sky and murmured, "Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for teaching me that love isn't silence, it's protecting what's right." Mabel smiled softly and touched her cup to mine. "And now, Gladys, it's time to live for yourself." I nodded and looked toward a bright horizon, calm as if the world had opened a new chapter, no shadows of fear, only the light of justice and kindness. On the first morning after the hearing, I sat on the porch, watching sunlight spread across the wooden floor. Mabel had just watered the lavender. A faint fragrance floated in the breeze. The radio gave a short update. Dane County Court announces final sentences in the elder abuse case in Madison. All parties have complied with the ruling. I turned it off. One chapter was closed, but I knew some doors can't be shut by a gavel. You have to lock them yourself with conditional forgiveness. That afternoon, there was a knock. I thought it was Kaplan or a delivery, but when I opened the door, I froze. Lila stood there. She had lost visible weight. Her face was pale, eyes swollen and bruised with fatigue. The once sleek blonde hair was tied carelessly, and in her hand was a folded sheet of paper. "Mom," she said softly, voice shaking. "I know you don't want to see me, but I need to say something." I didn't invite her in. A part of me was still guarded. I leaned on the doorframe and kept my voice even. "Go ahead, Lila." She bit her lip and inhaled. "I filed for divorce from Conrad. I can't stand the lies anymore. I want custody of Lucy and Caleb. I also started therapy as the court ordered, and I got a part-time job at the grocery store nearby." I was silent. Maybe for the first time, I saw no arrogance in my daughter-in-law, only real exhaustion. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Lila went on, voice catching. "I just want you to know, I'm trying to start over. I know I hurt you, and nothing can erase that, but I want to change for the kids and for myself." I went quiet for a few seconds. The breeze stirred the curtain, and the rage that had smoldered like a low fire in me felt like warm ash now. "Good," I said slowly. "If you're serious, keep going with long-term therapy and learn boundaries with money. I won't pay debts or hand out cash, but if you need advice, I'm willing to listen." Lila nodded, eyes wet. "I understand. You don't owe me anything. I just want to repay a small part, symbolically. Your medical bills I'll pay bit by bit, even if it's not much." I shook my head lightly. "I don't need the money. I need responsibility. Do the right things, and don't say more until you've actually done them." She lowered her head and gripped the paper. I knew it was the court's community service commitment requiring 1 year of service at Street Mercy Nursing Center. I didn't open the door wider, but I didn't close it either. I only said quietly, "Go on, Lila. Do it well. When you truly want to talk, I'll listen." She nodded, stepped back, and turned away. The slanting sun lit her small figure as it disappeared beyond the fence. A few weeks later, I received Lila's first letter. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten note. pale yellow paper, slanted script, still a little clumsy. Mom Gladys, today is my second week of community service at Street Mercy Nursing Home. At first I was scared. I thought I wouldn't stand the smell of disinfectant, the groans, the empty stares. But then I met Miss Nora. She's 89, and her son left her here 6 years ago without visiting. She held my hand and said, "Sweetheart, it's been so long since anyone brushed my hair." I cried, Mom. For the first time I understood how much abandonment hurts. I just want to say, I'm sorry, not because the court made me say it, but because now I'm truly ashamed. I don't know what I can make right yet, but I'll try. Love, Lila. I read the letter a third time before setting it down. Mabel sat beside me and said softly, "Not a single line mentions money, did you notice?" I nodded. Yes. For the first time, she mentions responsibility. I wrote a short note, clean as one decisive cut, but enough for Lila to understand. Keep going. In the following weeks, Lila kept writing regularly, not to beg, but to share small things. Her first day helping bathe a bedridden woman, the day she was assigned to read to the residents, the night shift listening to an old man tell war stories. Her tone began to change, less awkward, less defensive, more genuine. One day, she called. I hesitated, then picked up. "Mom, today I just want to tell you something small," she said, her voice light, as if afraid to break the space between us. Miss Nora said she forgives her son. She said, "Forgiving doesn't make me young again, but it helps me sleep." When I heard that, I thought of you. I was quiet for a long moment, then answered, "She's right. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace instead of chaining yourself to resentment." She didn't say anything more, just choked up. "I understand now, Mom." After that, our calls lost their fake brightness. Sometimes it was only a few short questions. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "The kids drew you some pictures." "I'm studying basic accounting again." And every time I hung up, I felt a little lighter, as if the thin threads of this relationship were being stitched back together, slowly but truly. Late in the month, Mabel came by with a basket of apples and a bright smile. "I hear Lila is still doing community service?" I nodded. "Yes, she's starting to understand a lot. The residents like her. Last week, the nursing home even sent a thank you note because Lila chose to stay late and wash a woman who was in severe pain." Mabel smiled. "See? That's the best therapy. No lecture teaches a person like having to bend down and care for someone else." I smiled, remembering myself in the days I volunteered as a nurse. Back then, I learned that kindness isn't innate, it's honed by small acts, wiping a patient's forehead, guiding an elder down the hall, listening to a lonely person ramble. Maybe Lila is on that path now. One morning, another letter arrived, shorter than the others. "Mom Gladys, I'm about to complete my first 3 months of community service. The doctor says I'm making good progress in therapy. Last week, I took Lucy and Caleb to visit Miss Nora. They helped me brush her hair." She said, "Thank you, you brought spring into my room. I think for the first time in years, I'm finding my own spring too. Thank you for not closing that door forever. I won't let you down again." I set the letter down and looked out at the yard. The lavender was still a deep purple in the new sun. Mabel came over, laid a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "See, Gladys? That's healing. Not just for her, for you too." I nodded, feeling a calm spread through me. Maybe for the first time in years, my heart wasn't shut tight anymore. I didn't fling the door wide, but I didn't lock it either. And sometimes, that alone is enough to let the light in. 3 months have passed since the hearing. Time is like a slow, steady current, enough for bones to knit, enough for me to see life with eyes that hurt less, fear less, and see more clearly than ever. At my final checkup, the doctor smiled. "Lungs are fine, ribs have healed nicely, Mrs. Gladys. Now go live however feels most meaningful to you." I knew exactly what I'd do first. On a May morning, Madison shone in early summer light. Flags hung outside the public library, where I'd reserved space to launch the Ruth Hope Fund, my late promise to my sister. The second-floor conference room was simple and warm. A few pots of Mabel's lavender flanking the lectern, a white cloth banner stitched with Ruth Hope Foundation because dignity shouldn't depend on money. I stood in the prep room mirror and straightened my pale gray jacket. Mabel stepped in and pinned a pearl brooch to my lapel. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled lightly, maybe a little nervous. "Nerves make sense," she squeezed my hand. "You're not just starting a fund, you're reopening trust." Outside, voices rose. I heard Kaplan and the laughter of familiar neighbors, a hospital nurse, the bookstore owner, a few people who helped me in those first days after the case. They came not to gawk, but to share a belief that something good can grow out of a wound. When I stepped up, a soft light wrapped the room. Mabel stood beside me. Kaplan sat in the front row, and in the very back I saw Lila. She stood quietly in a simple dress, no makeup, hair tied back. Her eyes were wet but steady. I nodded, just a small nod enough to say I saw her and that the door had never been locked. I took a breath and began the speech I'd written over many sleepless nights. 3 years ago, I lost my dearest sister Ruth. She was kind and hardworking, but cancer took everything. I watched her sell the car, then the house, and finally our mother's wedding ring just to buy a few more months. She died in debt, but to me, she was the richest person I knew because she never lost her decency. Today, I'm using $200,000 from selling the last family plot, a place that was both a burden and the scene of my betrayal, to do what Ruth dreamed of: help low-income women fight illness without selling their pride. I've learned that sometimes, to say yes to those who truly need help, you must dare to say no to what's wrong, even when it comes from those you love most. The Ruth Hope Fund isn't just money, it's proof that dignity isn't priced in dollars and that from wounds we can still sew good. I paused. Applause rose like a shared heartbeat. In the back, Lila bowed her head and covered her face. I saw her shoulders tremble. After the speech, Kaplan announced the fund's formation and the first 3 recipients. 3 women, a janitor, a single mother in chemo, and a retired elder came forward. They held confirmations showing their hospital bills paid directly by the fund. No envelopes, no cash, no gifts. I shook each hand, heard each "thank you," and fought back tears. One of them, Mrs. Johnson, squeezed my hand. "Thank you for understanding our fear, Mrs. Gladys. It's not death we fear, it's becoming a burden." I held her hand and whispered, "No one is a burden when they're loved." The event ended in a long round of applause. The local paper took photos, and the next day I saw the headline on the front page: "A mother turns betrayal into a lifeline for her community." Below was a picture of me and Mabel in front of the banner, lavender behind us. I'm not used to attention, but I knew that article would nudge others to speak up, to believe that old age doesn't mean helplessness. That afternoon, I sat alone in the library after everyone left. Kaplan and Mabel were tidying decorations while I reviewed the bylaws one last time. 1. Every disbursement must be transparent and reported monthly. 2. No cash transactions. 3. All hospital bills are paid directly to the hospital. 4. Recipients are not filmed or photographed unless they consent. It was the promise I wanted to give the community clean as morning light, leaving no corner for greed's shadow. Mabel came over and patted my shoulder. "All done. Now breathe." I smiled. For the first time in a long while, she looked around the now quiet room where lavender still scented the air and murmured, "Ruth is smiling." I nodded. I think so too. That evening when I got home, a brown envelope sat in the mailbox. No return address, just a clumsy scrawl. From Derek. I stood on the porch a long time. My hands shook. I'd imagined this day the day my son wrote to me, but when it arrived, my chest still tightened. Mabel, a step behind, saw me frozen. "A letter?" I nodded. "From him. What will you do?" I looked at the envelope, the wrinkled edges, the hesitant handwriting like a child writing in a rush. "I don't know. Part of me wants to open it, part of me is afraid." Mabel laid a hand on my shoulder. "Wait until you're ready, but don't let it scare you again." I was silent for a few seconds, then opened it. A single sheet, folded once, blue ink smudged in places. "Mom, I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't deserve it. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. In here, they make me learn anger, control, and how abuse works in families. I listened to every word and I finally see it wasn't that you were weak. I was the weak one, so weak I used violence to feel like I had power. I won't ask you to trust me again yet. I only want you to know I'm doing the work in the woodshop, in therapy, and in my own thoughts. When I get out, I'll ask to work at a community center or anywhere that needs someone to haul, mow, or mop. I want to use my hands for something decent instead of just talking. If one day you think I'm worthy of a conversation, I'll be there not to ask for anything, just to say thank you, Derek. I finished the last line with trembling hands. No tears, just a deep stillness, like a river gone windless. I folded the letter and set it in the drawer beside Ruth's photo. Mabel sat down and asked quietly, "You okay?" I nodded slightly. "I am. I just didn't think I'd hear his voice again like this on paper." She gave me a small smile. "Maybe it's the start of him waking up." I looked out the window. The moon hung bright, lighting the dewy yard. "Maybe," I whispered. "A real apology isn't to erase the past, but to let a person begin again." Mabel put a hand on my shoulder. "And you're beginning again too, Gladys, in your own way." I glanced at the letter, then at the small sign on the wall. Ruth Hope Foundation. Moonlight made the word hope shine the brightest. I smiled quiet, deep, and true, because I knew the light had finally won over the dark. On an early autumn morning, with mist still soft over the Madison rooftops, I opened the mailbox as usual. Amid flyers and utility bills was a white envelope, the corner marked in a familiar hand, from Oakfield Correctional Center, Derek Whitaker. I held it for a long time, as if it weighed the whole past. Months had passed since the first letter, and I didn't know if I had the courage to read this one, but at last I sat on the double-tame porch chair, drew a long breath, and opened it. No perfume, just the dry smell of paper and slightly blurred blue ink. The first line read, "Mom, I started dual recovery alcohol and gambling. They call it dual recovery. Every day I have to write down feelings and face the past instead of blaming fate. For the first time, I see I'm sick, not unlucky. My sickness isn't in the blood, it's in how I see the world, always thinking someone else is at fault." I read slowly, each word dropping into me. Derek had never spoken about himself this way. "In here, Mom, everyone has a story. Some lost everything, some were abandoned. I had everything: a home, a mother who loved me, and I destroyed it with my own hands. Each morning I look at the steel wall calendar and see the red boxes I mark. One box is one day I live with awareness. Yesterday, while cleaning the storage room, I found a shard of mirror. In it, I saw your face from that day when I shoved you, when you stood up without crying. You know, with that one shove, I wrecked an entire life. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to keep your distance if you need it, so you can be at peace. I don't need instant forgiveness. I want you to know I'm working in the woodshop, in therapy, in every thought. When I'm out, I'll ask for a job at a community center or anywhere that needs someone to carry loads, cut grass, mop floors. I want to make decent things with my hands instead of just talking." I paused, breathing deeply, feeling my heart soften slowly. No more anger, only a sorrow. I could finally name sorrow for what was lost, and sorrow that comes with understanding. I folded the letter and placed it on my lap. The breeze carried the lavender scent from the corner of the yard. Mabel came out with 2 hot coffees. "Another letter from the facility?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yes. He's in dual recovery, and, for the first time, he's telling the truth about himself." Mabel sat beside me, set the cup down, and spoke in that steady, trusted voice. "Gladys, forgiveness isn't a gift for someone else. It's a gift you give yourself so your heart can rest." I smiled faintly. "I don't know if I can call it forgiveness yet. But maybe I don't want to carry hatred anymore." "That's enough," she said, taking a sip. "That's healing." That afternoon, I sat at the table and pulled out a blank sheet. I wrote back, each line clear and spare. "Derek, I read your letter. I see you're trying, and that matters. I won't say forgiveness that has to arrive on its own, the way skin closes after a wound, but I believe if you finish the program, you'll have a chance to start over. You don't owe me money or grand gestures. Make amends with daily decency to others and to yourself. Finish the program. I'll see you on a brighter day. Mom, Gladys." I folded it, sealed the envelope. When Mabel drove me to the post of office to mail it, I felt a strange peace, as if, after many months, I could finally breathe without fear of breaking. 1 year since the Ruth Hope Fund began, that morning I stood in the small office next to the town library, looking at the board on the wall. 52 women had their hospital bills covered. More than $300,000 transferred directly to hospitals, not a single dollar through a middleman. I held the newest list names, stories, women pulled pulled back from despair by a portion of money from that land long ago. Kaplan walked in, neat suit as always, a file in hand. Congratulations. Ruth Hope is officially recognized as a nonprofit. You've done what many younger folks wouldn't dare. I smiled and answered softly, I only did what Ruth would have done if she were here. He nodded and left. I turned back to the desk and opened the window. Morning light spread over the wooden plaque engraved, Dignity, Healing, Hope. 3 short words, enough to remind me why I keep going. I bought an old pickup faded blue. Kaplan and Mabel objected at first, but both had to laugh when they saw me driving to hospitals to hand-deliver payment paperwork. Aren't you afraid you'll get tired? Mabel asked. I shrugged. I drive slow. My hands need to remember the wheel anyway. On the road, wind ran across fields of ripening grain. Sunlight flashed on the windshield, reflecting a silver-haired woman with bright eyes. I felt truly alive, not existing in fear, but living in freedom and worth. At the gas station, a young man looked over and grinned. Nice truck, ma'am. You drive yourself? I nodded. I drive myself, show up myself, do the work myself, and I make my own happiness. He laughed and gave a thumbs up. I smiled back and pulled away, light as air. That night, I sat before the mirror and practiced steady breaths. Each one still tugged a little at my left side where 2 ribs had broken. I coughed lightly, heard my own echo, and felt no sharp pain. I touched my chest and smiled at my reflection. Bones are set, I whispered, and the heart is healing too. Mabel came in with ginger tea. She sat and asked softly, Tired today? I shook my head. No, just grateful. Because all the things that looked like endings turned out to be beginnings. She nodded and took my hand. You know, Gladys, you didn't just save yourself. You helped others believe they still have a chance. I smiled and looked out the window. Somewhere out there, tomorrow's sunrise waited, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to step toward it, not for anyone else, but for me. The breeze moved through, light as a whisper. Ruth, do you see? I did it. And in that moment, I knew every wound, no matter how deep, can heal when the heart allows itself to open to the light. A year since the day I signed the papers to sell the old land, my life stepped into 71 with a peace I once thought was a luxury. The small house on the edge of town is tidier and cozier than ever. Each morning, when dawn pours through the white curtains and spills across the freshly painted wooden porch, I sip a cup of black coffee and listen to sparrows chirping on the roof. I still wake early, as always, only now I no longer feel like I must brace myself to survive. I get to live in the truest sense. Mabel still stops by regularly with apple pie or a jar of strawberry jam. She jokes that I've changed my breath. No more heaviness, no more pressure. I smile because it's true. I've learned to let my heart be light without being shallow, strong without bitterness. Lila is different now. Over the past year, she completed all of her community service, kept up with regular therapy, and started working at the local health center, the same place the Ruth Hope Fund once supported. Every time I visit, she usually tells me about patients who need help and the elders she meets. Each day, my 2 grandkids, Lucy and Caleb, still stop by the porch every Saturday afternoon. They toddle around the yard, help me water the purple lavender pots, and always end with a snack of Mabel's butter cookies. Lila brings them, sits a little way off, not pushing herself into the center of the meal like before. She just watches quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes tearing up. I understand it's how she's relearning her place just enough, not too close, not too far. As for Derek, he's close to qualifying for parole. Kaplan told me in his steady voice, "You can see your son if you want, but I recommend clear boundaries. You don't owe anyone sacrifice anymore." I nodded. I know that when that door opens, I'll face the man who was once the child I held, and also the one who shoved me and broke my ribs. But this time, I won't tremble. I have my boundaries not to punish, but to protect. I wrote a few short lines in my notebook. If Derek truly changes, his road can still lead toward the light. But for the first meeting, it should only be a conversation in a public place, with Kaplan or a supervisor present. I will listen, but I won't forget. Boundaries don't make me cold. They let me love without losing myself. One morning, while cleaning a cabinet, I looked again at the old land sale contract. The number $200,000 is still there, once the source of so much pain, now the foundation for so much joy. I chuckled to myself. Turns out money isn't bad, it just needs to be put in the right place. Not a single dollar of it was used to buy peace just for me, but every dollar is saving someone's life, someone I I may never meet. Next to the contract is the Ruth Hope Fund's ledger. I did exactly as Kaplan advised. Transparency, clarity, no cash, no middlemen. Every disbursement is carefully logged. The patient's name, payment date, hospital amount, hospital confirmation. Mabel says I could hire help, but I just smile. This work keeps my mind clear, and it reminds me that goodness doesn't have to be grand, just steady. Toward evening, I sat in the garden and looked at the orchid by the window. It's the same orchid where I once hid a tiny camera to capture the first evidence that saved me. Now the camera is broken, the red light long gone. Only sunlight reflects on the thin petals. I said softly to myself, no need to record anymore. What needed proving? I've already proven. If the past is a crack, the present is the seam, and I believe seams, when fused with truth and compassion, can be stronger than the untouched parts ever were. Sometimes I receive thank you letters from women the fund helped. One wrote, I thought I would die in silence, but now I can get treatment, and more than that, I know I still have worth. I read each line with a tight throat. Perhaps this is the final meaning of freedom, not to be forgiven, but to turn your pain into something that helps others keep living. That night, I opened my computer and posted on the Ruth Hope Fund page. I wrote, a year ago, I thought my life had ended after being harmed by my own blood. But today, I understand that saying no to your own blood isn't cruelty. It's the only way to keep your self-respect. Money can't buy peace, but placed in the right hands, it can save lives. And family ties, when set within boundaries, can still be reborn in respect. I hit post and smiled. Outside on the porch, the night breeze carried the sweet scent of lavender, mingled with a distant rooster's crow greeting the early hours. I closed my notebook, turned off the light, and in the moonlight slipping through the window, I told myself, tomorrow's dawn will rise, and so will I. And now, if anyone asks what I've learned from it all, I'll answer with 3 words: self-respect, freedom, conditional kinship. Because no one can truly love others without first learning to love themselves. Thank you for listening to my story all the way to the end. If you're somewhere in a quiet afternoon or hearing me from a faraway city, tell me, where are you listening from? And what do you think about boundaries in families? Can saying no sometimes be the truest form of love? Please share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for the journeys ahead. Every comment from you is an invaluable encouragement, not just for me, but for all the women who need to be heard and to believe that, even late, we can still begin again. I look up at the dawn spreading across the porch, light touching my silver hair, and I smile softly, closing the story of my life. I chose self-respect and found freedom.